Is your favorite gacha game pay to win? It's a simple question, but I'm willing to bet that 99% of the time tells me your response is a no. If you ask me, questions such as, is X game free to play friendly, or is X game pay to win, are some of the most pointless questions to be asking. After all, which gaming community would collectively agree that their favorite game is pay to win? This sentiment doesn't just come from nowhere, as it happens to tie into a topic that I see a lot of conflicting discussions on: difficulty in gacha games. Whenever difficult content is added to the game, you often find opinions split right down the middle. Is the game at fault for making certain content too hard, or is it the player's fault for not learning the necessary skills or investments to beat it? The answer will hugely depend on, well, quite a lot of factors. My name is Psyche, and I want to talk about this today. Given the discourse surrounding this topic in the context of this genre of games, I want to give my clear definition on what point the fault lies with the game or with the player, as well as detailing what I think which gacha games I truly believe are the most difficult. This is bound to be one of the more subjective topics I've covered, so let's discuss difficulty in gacha games. Before I get started with the discussion, I would like to give a brief shout out to today's video sponsor, Stella Sora. Stella Sora is a top-down isometric casual adventure RPG with a blend of fantasy and modern aesthetics. Playable on iOS, Android, and PC, Stella Sora features a lighthearted story and atmosphere with a colorful cast of adventurers called Trekkers. With a core roguelike gameplay loop, you can experiment with different builds and team combinations to experience a unique adventure every time. Embark in numerous game modes as you put your team building and mechanical skills to the test, uncovering many secrets along the way. Beautifully illustrated with a casual and detailed design, bond with your fellow trekkers with a dedicated messaging and invite system. Version 1.0 features Chitose, a vanguard trekker of the Aqua Affinity who will be the first 5-star character when the game launches. Currently, I have generally positive opinions of Stella Sora, and I will be posting my own unsponsored independent review of the game in a few weeks. Until then, use the link in the description or pinned comment to download and try out the game today, alongside an exclusive redemption code for more goodies when you begin. Once again, thank you to Stella Sora for sponsoring the video, and now let's return to the discussion. So, in order to better understand this debate on difficulty, I think it's best to first learn about horizontal versus vertical progression. In other words, in what way is the player challenged, and how do they become stronger? I'll visualize it on a line. On the left, we have horizontal progression, and on the right, vertical. Horizontal progression refers to anything skill-oriented, get better at executing movements, or learn certain team rotations, or just playing around the enemy gimmick. Vertical refers to stat-oriented progression, you leveling up your characters, getting a new passive ability, pulling the best-in-slot support unit from the gacha. To simplify it, stats go up, you get stronger. If you pull the signature weapon of a character in a gacha game, that will be considered a vertical investment. Every video game will have a combination of both types of progression and pin itself somewhere on this line. Where it ends up largely depends on the genre of the game and what resources you can access within the game. Now, before you come up with any weird notions on how the best video games are ones of the far left, since it's all about skill and not about stats, let me just say that there is no objective way to measure difficulty in a video game, and fitting a game anywhere on this line is a valid choice for a developer. On the far right of the line, I place idle games and auto battlers, such as AFK Journey. You set your team down and watch them battle it out, no input required. Make stat-based upgrades to your champions to make them stronger. That obviously doesn't mean that there are no skill-oriented aspects of the game. I'm sure team building and placements can come into effect as well. On the far left side, I would argue the honor goes to rhythm games. There's no upgrades you can make, no online tutorials that will somehow make you better. The level layout is the exact same every time, so there's no room for RNG to become a factor. When you improve at a rhythm game, you really just got better as a player. If we follow the absurd argument above, does that mean that as a rhythm gamer, I would stand on a pedestal and call everyone else inferior gamers because they don't play purely skill-based games? No, that's ridiculous. Maybe someone just doesn't like playing rhythm games, and that's okay. A game for everyone is a game made for no one. We play games to have fun, and what is fun is subjective. Does it mean that Cookie Clicker is a bad game because it has no gameplay except tapping a button? Does it mean Stardew Valley is a bad game because it's overly casual and there's no stakes involved? Simplistic and casual games have their own fan bases, and that's totally fine. What I want to prove with this section is dispelling the argument that challenging game equals better. You can absolutely prefer to play difficult games, except that's just that. A preference, not an objective critique you can make. What gacha games sell to you can be considered either horizontal or vertical. For example, when the Dendro element was introduced to Genshin Impact, pulling Dendro characters didn't overpower the other elements or make you stronger. It only gave you more options for player expression. It was just different. Circling back to the topic of signature weapons, in the vast majority of cases, if you pull it, your numbers just get bigger. If you spend money on the game, you absolutely will gain more power. And that's kind of the entire point. A major nuance in the land of gacha games is that games on the far right side of the scale often get a lot of flack accused of being pay to win. After all, if there's minimal player input, and you pay money for an upgrade, you can more easily tell that the money is what got you that advantage. So to tackle the discussion surrounding difficulty in gacha games, I will be splitting the talking points into 3 subsections. Number 1. What content is difficult? Number 2. What are the consequences of said content being difficult? And number 3. Does it even matter that it's difficult? We'll start by discussing the nature of gacha games. Mobile games at its core are meant to be casual. In fact, if you wanted to cast a wide net and want the best chances of your game surviving, especially among all the competition these days, it's in your best interest to appeal to a mostly casual audience. And that's exactly what the frontrunners of the gacha space do. When I was playing through Genshin's Natlan storyline, there are certain sections where you can tone down the difficulty, even though I think Genshin's story content is already easy enough. In Reverse 1999, later chapters features a breezy mode, where the level suggestion is eased down, though you just can't claim the full rewards unless you beat it in normal mode. In certain Withering Wave story fights, you literally just get infinite revives. Not exactly difficult if you don't have a lose condition. That obviously doesn't mean that challenging content doesn't exist in these games at all. It's just that they're located in their separate late game modes. At times, you can even argue that they're optional content. Meanwhile, the bulk of other content in the game is fairly casual, such as the main story and events, and can be completed by pretty much anyone without much trouble. So, one approach is to have the core content of the game be approachable by everyone, and leave the challenging stuff as its own content. Now, I've seen another design approach to this. I think if the core content of a gacha game is hard, then I believe it's safe to attribute that the game itself is hard. So that begs the question. What exactly is the core content in a gacha game? What content will every player have to go through, and what content is truly mandatory? After thinking about it for a while, I can only think of one thing: the story. The story in any gacha game is integral to building up its world and characters. Given that the very nature of a gacha game is to incentivize you to pull for characters by presenting their backstory, the lore is where the bulk of the legwork is done. There are absolutely a handful of gacha games that present difficult story encounters in addition to having an optional challenge mode. Why does it matter? Well, here's why. Difficulty can create memorable moments in a gacha game's story. There are some bizarre moments during a gacha game story campaign where a level or boss fight presents a sudden difficulty spike, forcing you to rethink your strategies or learn certain game mechanics. Think of the Gawain fight in Vagrant Order, the Frostnova fight in Arknights, the Dombike fight in Limbus Company, the Shark boss from Tribe 9. It's not that these encounters are that hard, it's that the game doesn't prepare you for these. Everything leading up to these moments have been fairly tame with the difficulty curve. Except this one just suddenly went vertical on you. The first time I fought Dombike, I thought, wait, is this supposed to be a scripted loss? When the battle is won, the in-game characters all appear battered and bruised, and you're there knowing that you struggled alongside them to achieve victory. Against impossible odds, you came on top. You really triumphed. Given that most gacha game story content is presented in visual novel format, you can just watch a replay or walkthrough of these levels instead, but you will not be able to experience the excitement of overcoming these challenges. There can be something that can be said about this kind of approach, as some might argue that the difficulty of any video game should be gradual. As the game progresses, it slowly gets harder, so this sudden difficulty spike is just not good game design. However, there's also another side to the argument. You can argue that the difficulty spike is refreshing, memorable. These moments hit you like a truck, and that's what makes it stick out. It's a wake-up call to the player. You gotta lock in and actually learn the game mechanics to overcome this major barrier. This is the noob stopper that separates the casuals from the true fans of the game. However, this can also be a delicate point of balance. Make it too hard and the casual crowd will start to complain or straight out leave. Not to mention, it might lead to players speculating that the devs want you to wail or pull certain characters to clear the story content. There are numerous examples in gacha gaming where the developer had to nerf certain encounters when a sizable amount of players raised their concerns. One such case is with Heaven Burns Red. Before the time of the global server's release, some of the story fights were just extremely difficult. And after some statistics were examined by developers, it turned out that only a small percentage of the player base actually got past a certain point in the story. This was a problem. Given that one of HBR's main attractions is its amazing story, why on earth would you gatekeep one of the main things that people are playing your game for? And so, the encounters were nerfed, and naturally, more players started beating it and continued its story. When the game eventually launched globally, I still thought these encounters were fairly difficult, but never enough to cause a major headache. Designing the difficulty in a gacha game's story content has to be done with the utmost care. Unless a game is already known for its difficult content, it's quite a hard ask for a new gacha game to design them this way. We've already taken a look at Tribe 9 and how its overly difficult campaign is arguably one of the factors that led to its downfall. Can you really blame the game for simply trying to maintain its financial and creative interests? After all, making $5 doesn't matter if it came from a casual or a hardcore player. It's still profit for you in the end. A reality is that when a game becomes too mainstream, the voice of the casual players hold the majority. You will have to start catering to them to maintain the player base. Unfortunately for the developers, while I'm sure there will be some people that like the challenge, there's no easy fix that will satisfy everyone. Well, unless you count adjustable difficulty sliders, but I guess no one figured that out yet. So, from a business perspective, if they had to choose one way to proceed, then it makes sense to make the choice that will satisfy the most players. Due to how much competition is in the gacha gaming space, if a new blood developer wants the best chance for their game to succeed, the best bet would be to attract the casual player base. If you do try to go for the hardcore route, you're taking a bigger risk as some people might just quit when they encounter a block in the road. If you played Arknights, you've likely gotten stuck on the last training stage for a little bit. TR-15 gives you a preset team and asks you to beat the stage with them. You literally can't make upgrades or change the lineup. You're just hard stuck here in the story until you beat it. The mobile gaming audience has always been casual. If you ask me, the best bet is to follow what the major players are doing. Separate the core content with the challenge content. You can put it in the game, just make sure it's there for those that want the challenge. This is also the reason that I play Reverse 1999. The story and event content are piss easy, and the end game is mostly a numbers game to see if you have enough stats or levels. Of course, sometimes you do have to play to an enemy's mechanic, but mostly you can just follow a set rotation and get things done relatively stress-free. Alongside the lack of an RNG gearing system, no weapon banner, and permanently available events and characters, the casual atmosphere and well-presented story just happens to be what I'm looking for as a long-term game. Maybe I don't want to sweat blood and tears every time I log in, I just want to play something relaxing before bed. But hey, if a new hardcore gacha game does come out and manages to sustain itself, I'd be very impressed. We've talked about where difficult content can be located in gacha games and the consequences of them. Although, there is one more question remaining. Why bother making difficult content at all? Aside from story sentiments and bragging rights, there is one more reason that's a bit more sinister. Difficulty can be used as a way to monetize. You may have noticed that in a lot of gacha games, the endgame challenge content is often tailored towards whichever shiny SSR is on raid up. Maybe the enemy lineup just happens to be weak against the class or element of the raid up. Maybe the boss target has a shield that the raid up 5-star has an extremely easy time breaking. You'll notice how your performance is rated often depends on something like the time spent or the number of turns. It's not that if you're talented to beat it at all, if you want the full rewards, you gotta start optimizing. In a case like this, difficulty is artificially injected to slightly nudge you to pull for the new 5-star and make you really feel the benefits of having them. And I kinda don't have a problem with that. See, the key here is to not design it in a way that's just blatantly pushing players to pull for the new limited 5-star. After all, I'm sure many would make the argument that you don't need to pull them, and you can consistently clear it without the raid up character. Just maybe a bit more difficult, but still completely doable. I mean, yeah, that's technically true. Back when I played Genshin and the Abyss was its sole endgame, I did fully clear it numerous times with the low spender roster I had. But all in all, you have to understand that gacha gaming is a business. The company is trying to make money. And honestly, I see this as a pretty tame way to monetize. It's kind of like paying an extra $1 to revive yourself in Temple Run, just less blatant. Now, the developer has full control on how difficult they want the game to be. However, there is a major difference between difficulty in a gacha game versus a single-player game. In Elden Ring or Hollow Knight, everyone paid the upfront fee to get the game. Aside from that, everyone has access to the same resources. You can't pay an extra $5 to make your attacks stronger. However, in a live service mobile game where one of the main draws of the game is to sell power to you, you bet that if you get lucky or heavily invest in certain areas of the game, you can make yourself stronger. There's a very big difference here. Difficulty is no longer just a creative decision to make the game as fun as it can be, as in the context of a gacha game, the developers have a very clear incentive to lock more power behind more pulls or random chance like RNG relics, and purposefully manipulate the difficulty to make it more compatible with the latest shiny 5-star to reward those that did pull them. It's not designed as equally as you think. So we've established that there's two categories of gacha games on how difficult content is handled. One separates the core content with the challenging stuff as its own modes, and select others have difficult encounters baked right into the story. Both are valid approaches, but developers must understand that by nature, mobile games are meant to be accessible and mostly appeal to a broad and casual audience. While those brave enough to put difficult levels in the story make it memorable, there's also a balancing point that you can't cross over. You might just turn away potentially paying customers, and that's not exactly good business. As a bonus topic, I've played way too many gachas at this point, so I'll include some of the titles I think are genuinely the hardest I've played and where the difficulty actually feels fair. If you're familiar with the Chinese company Zilong Game, they've made some pretty difficult gacha games. There's Langrisser Mobile, where progression pretty much takes place over the course of years, so don't expect to be clearing content fast. If you're looking for something more modern, I also reviewed Mekurashi on this channel. And from general sentiments from its players, once you reach the mid-game content, every single move you make feels impactful, and a single blunder can cripple you. Suddenly, those turn rewind tokens change from being just a nice compliment to potentially game-changing if used at the right times. Wizardry Variants Daphne is one of the more hardcore gachas I've played, with a permadeath system for your allies. To be honest, it's more of a gimmick and will likely never affect you, though one thing that bummed me out was that you could pay a monthly sub to lift some of the hardcore aspects of the game. As for the reward for the hardest gacha game I played, that honor goes to Morimans. It's a turn-based deck builder roguelike very similar to Slay the Spire. I've reviewed it on the channel, and I think the difficulty is turned up to the extreme when you do the later story fights. Basically, like in Slay the Spire fashion, the attack the enemy will do is telegraphed, but it feels like there's a lot of weight in every single turn. Most endgame bosses have attacks that can straight up one-shot you, and it feels you're constantly fighting for breathing room while trying to turn the tables. There's a revival mechanic where it restores your team's health and energy, and one is refreshed every day up to 5. When I got to the final story chapter, I ran a meta team with dupes, and I thought I might have actually run out of the free revive tokens. The final boss gauntlet in the very last story chapter is some of the most butt-clenching action I've encountered in a gacha game. The bosses feel unfair, except it also feels like you can do some unfair things back. And this was after I learned that these encounters have been nerfed numerous times. As you can see, truly difficult gacha games do exist. It's just that the general gacha audience doesn't know about them, because they never appeal to a mainstream crowd. How the discussion of difficulty appears to you ultimately depends on what you want out of a gacha game. It's natural that people want to feel powerful. You want the road of least resistance to maximize your progress in your account. If you're a free-to-play or low spender that wants to clear all the challenging content in the game, just know that there's room to argue that the developer can intentionally design the content in a way that favors certain characters in order to showcase the newest SSR's power. The difficulty in gacha games is often not designed equally, and that's due to the developers having a monetary incentive to design it as such. That obviously doesn't mean you can't clear yourself, you just have to understand that you're gonna have to work for it. Think of it as an invisible difficulty slider. If you own the current rate of 5-star or have a whale account, then the slider is on the easier side. But if you don't have either, prepare to face some pain, and that's kind of exactly the point. Anyways, that does it for this discussion on difficulty in gacha games, so let me know what you think. If you want to catch more gacha-related discussions like this, you know what to do. For those that want to go the extra mile, you can support me for what I do for as little as $2 a month on Patreon. Thank you for tuning in as always, be sure to spend moderately, and have fun out there.